There you go, Rabbi Gadi.
Great.
And then sit here and let me after you sit.
Okay, we're ready to start. Begin. Hi, Sue. Welcome back. Hi, Jim. Okay, we've got a couple of Susans. Hi, everyone. Okay, so I believe we're studying the laws of interpersonal relationships. At least that's what I was told to prepare. And the class for today is called Tochacha, rebuke. No way to say it nicely. Okay, who wants to give a rebuke? I think there we had it. So I've got a great Gemara over here. It starts like this. The Talmud says, Rabbi Tarfon said, it was taught in a brayso. Rabbi Tarfon was a great Torah scholar. He said, and this was 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago in the Talmud. And he says, Tomea ani, I wonder if there exists in this generation anyone who knows how to accept. The Gemara is talking about the obligation to rebuke. So he says, hold on. Let me make progress over here. I don't know if there's anyone in this generation who knows how to give rebuke. Because you'll tell one person you've got something stuck in between your teeth. He will say, how dare you tell me that there's something wrong with my teeth or that I got something stuck in my teeth. He'll say, Tol kora mibein einecha, remove the beam from between your eyes. Meaning, don't tell me that there's something wrong with me. You've got something wrong with you, right? So it doesn't seem like things have changed much. Yeah? Next time your husband makes a suggestion, what are you gonna say? I think I don't know. Okay, you get I've learned to keep my mouth shut. Okay, that's it. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. So Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, he comes back with the second perspective, and he says, I don't know if it's people not being able to accept rebuke. I don't know if there's anyone in this generation who actually knows how to give rebuke. We know how to give rebuke.
Actually, we don't.
Well, that's what he's saying. Giving rebuke. Giving rebuke is the art of giving rebuke is the art of enabling someone to change. That's really where it's at. It's not telling someone that they're wrong, because we're all got challenges, we're all lacking. So to try and tell someone that they're wrong, that's, I don't know, why do you need to tell someone else that they're wrong, that they need to change? We'll have to change. The challenge is to get someone to change is really where the challenge is. And I think those words are of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is true. How do you get someone to change? How do you get someone to change? Okay. And that's really the subject, or the word rebuke, but it's really how do you empower someone to change? I think that may be a more positive swing on things. How does one go and get someone else to change?
Yeah, more.
Okay. So first of all, I mean, how does it go when we try and tell our kids off and rebuke our kids or try and change our kids? How does that go? I think that's we can all speak from personal experience. Any suggestions? You can't make someone else change. I'm just throwing it out there. By modeling. Right. I listened to a class. I listened to a share. He's in Israel, and he said, "Everyone is so sensitive nowadays. If someone's taken to court, they'll say, it was so wonderful how you murdered the person without causing them too much pain. You can't say anything too harsh because people may get hurt."
Right, and so then.
No, but I agree with you 100%. Right? I mean, like 5-1 is what we always try and work on. Five positives before one criticism.
Yes.
My daughter would be like, "You like that? Oh, I'm gonna take it." Yeah.
I think it really depends on who you It's different with a child. And I remember years ago, I used to go to this place called Family Med. And the woman that ran the program, she always said that let your child lead you as opposed to you leading them, and then make changes.
Okay, so the question is, do we have an obligation to help people change?
We have an obligation to do what?
To help people change.
Yes. Who's deciding? Decided you need to change.
Good.
Why do
Do we have a preference? That's a great question. Let's go. Yeah.
I disagree with that. Who are you? If you're the mother, your kid is sitting here and throws a thing at the table and whatever, the child needs to change. Depends what I'm doing. If I am doing a speech to the street, you need to come and.
Okay, hold on. Let's move. Let's make progress. We get in this. Susie, you wanted to say something?
I was just going to say that, and this has been insinuated, that there's moral responsibility that's sat by God. And yes, you have to have a shared value. And then you do, you're not saying it, you're saying the Torah said it. You learned this from Moses at Mount Sinai, from God. There is right and wrong. You just have to, so it depends on your relationship. I mean, obviously, if a complete stranger is doing something in the world, then you have to maybe not confront them because this is a crazy society. They can do anything to, but you can certainly call 911.
Okay, Adrian.
know that story. You don't know why people are sick.
Right.
And so I think it's kind of.
I'm just going to lift this up.
I was referring to people.
No,
who,
no, no.
Who, you know, you have a relationship with, close relationship, and you can be open. You brought up the stranger saying,
Okay,
"No,
so
this is immoral,
let's.
don't do it."
Okay, yeah.
Word. Because it's like. Grow.
Right. Okay, so let
She wants to
what,
say something.
yeah, sorry.
Happened,
Okay, I love that. Okay, so what we like to do is always, let's go to the text, right? Let's go see what the Torah has to say about this concept. So I'm going to take it out of context. I'm going to read the verse out of context, and then we'll read it back in context to maybe give us more help with how to read the verse. Okay, out of context, here it goes. You shall reprove your fellow and do not bear a sin because of it. Give rebuke and do not bear a sin because if you do not bear rebuke. Meaning, we have someone that did something wrong, that does something wrong, cheating on their taxes, lying, whatever it may be, dishonesty, stealing, thievery, whatever they are. Someone does something wrong. The Torah says, I want you to tell them off, give them rebuke, because you shall not bear a sin because of it. If I don't give rebuke, I bear the sin. Almost there's this concept of, if I don't correct other people, then I kind of am a partner or a share to some degree in their wrongdoing. Okay? That's out of context, right? Now imagine I walked around and started telling everyone where they're lacking. What kind of world would we have?
I know people like that.
We have a political world. We have a whole slew of radio personalities and TV personalities that's their job, right? Just go and show you where other people are wrong. So what I want to do is I want to bring it into context. Because obviously it seems like just read that verse, you shall give rebuke and not bear sin because of them. Meaning, if I see someone doing something wrong, I need to go and tell them they did something wrong, because if I don't tell them, then I will bear a sin. Okay. The Torah gives, so that's not the full verse. The full verse is verse 17. It says, you shall not hate your brother in your heart. You shall reprove your fellow and do not bear a sin because of it. Do not hate them in your heart. Give them rebuke and not bear a sin. So what does that verse mean? Do not hate them in your heart. Tell them off and not bear a sin.
Page and stuff.
Page 661. I have handouts. I thought my page 661. Let me just grab one of these. Do not hate, to dislike. I like that.
How many steps? Is it from 8?
And if it's one.
It's not the same.
I have 10 copies.
I was just guessing, these issues like are different, but how far would we?
It's a good question. Right. For sure. For sure. Do not, exactly. Do not criticize just to criticize. That's for sure.
I
Okay.
wonder why she moved away.
No, she wants a table.
No, because she doesn't like.
Don't start. Let's start. Okay, we're going to Leviticus chapter 19 or 661. And the verse that I just quoted to you was verse 19, but we're going to start at verse 17. Do not go about as a talebearer with your countrymen. Okay, don't go as a talebearer. Lo telech rachil. This is the obligation not to speak lashon hara. Do not speak negatively about other people. It's called a talebearer. Do not speak negatively about another person. Yes. Yeah. Talebearer. A talebearer is someone who goes around and tells stories about other people. Okay. Do not stand by your brothers by the blood of your fellow, because I am Hashem your God. Meaning, if you go and talk negatively about other people, there's blood on your hands. Verse number 2, verse 18, you shall not hate your fellow in your heart. Reprove your kinsman, reprove your fellow person, and do not incur guilt because of them. Right? So number 1, don't go around speaking lashon hara. Don't go around speaking negatively about someone else. Go tell them directly, try and correct them. Give them, tell them, reprove them. And then the next verse, lo tikom v'lo titor. Do not take vengeance or bear a grudge against your fellow. Love your fellow as yourself. I am Hashem your God. Here is where the verse is, the obligation to love. So the Torah starts. Do not go and talk negatively about other people. Right? And there's this blood. The Tamid al Damrayach. Do not stand by your fellow's blood. Meaning if someone is dying, do not go and stand by, do nothing. Okay? So almost the Torah is putting these two together. Speak negatively about someone goes and does something wrong. Instead of going and trying to help them change, what are you going to do? What are we going to do? We're going to speak negatively about them. What that causes is that causes them to either continue to do wrong because you haven't reproached them, or at the other perspective that the Chafetz Chaim says, if I go and talebear about them, what that really happens is that I have blood on my hands. Whose blood? Their blood. Because what's going to happen is people are not going to want to do business with them. People are not going to like them. People are not going to try and help them. And ultimately, it's going to be their blood that's on my hands. So don't speak Lashon Hara. Don't speak negatively because it has blood on your hands. Then, Lo tiznei et achicha b'levavecha. Don't hate them in your heart. Meaning, if I see someone doing wrong, first thing, the default, I want to go and tell other people. Okay, I'm not allowed. The Torah says, don't go talking negatively about them. What do I need to do? So maybe I'll keep it all within myself. If I keep it within myself, then there's an issue of hating with my fellow person. Why am I hate the person? Because I can't stand what they did. There's some hate going on. Torah says, don't hate them, but go and give them a rebuke. Change them. Lo tiko, do not take vengeance or grudge against your fellow man, and love them. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Love your fellow as yourself. Love them like you would love yourself. Okay. So there's a beautiful Ramban that I want to quote, and it's right over here at the bottom, because ultimately we all struggle with how do we guide other people when they do something wrong. Now, I want to separate two things. There's a part with regards to them and heaven, them and God, and then there's parts with regards to my personal offense. When someone speaks negatively to me or against me, how do I process that? Okay, so we need to separate it. If someone is behaving extremely immoral or unethical or whatever it is between them and God, so there clearly is an obligation to go and try and adjust them and help them, guide them, okay, with sensitivity so that it produces results, right? If I try and guide them and then they hate me because of that, it's not achieving it, because the Torah says, don't hate your fellow in your heart, right? So when I try and guide them, correct them, if I need to do so where I have a place where they're not going to hate me in their heart, okay? So let's just go through the quotes as we have. First, they said, we have this, it said in the Sifra, what am I quoting over here? This is the Chinuch. So the Chinuch, he counts every mitzvah and he goes through, he says, one of the mitzvot, how many mitzvahs are there? 613. There's a book called the Chinuch. The Chinuch is a place where you can go and find every single mitzvah, where it's quoted, where in the Torah, and the root or the source of what each mitzvah is. So here, I'm just pulled a quote from the Chinuch with regards to rebuke. And he said, they said in the Sifra, perhaps he should rebuke and his face changed color. Meaning, perhaps I should tell a person, even though I'm going to embarrass them, perhaps I should tell them correctly. Hence, we learn to say, and you shall not bear a sin for him. And this teaches that at the beginning of the rebuke, it is fitting for a person to rebuke privately with soft expression, calm words, so that he not be embarrassed. We've got to be very careful about how we go about giving rebuke or trying to help people change, because it needs to be done with sensitivity. They're not embarrassed. And it's from the roots of the commandment that it is because there is peace and goodness between people with this. Meaning the goal is to bring peace between fellow men. As when a man sins to a fellow man and he rebukes him privately, the person will have the opportunity of perhaps apologizing in front of him, and the other will accept the apology and he will be whole, some amount of peace with him. But if it does not rebuke him, he will loathe him in his heart and injure him at the time at the time or at some other point in time. And if I go about doing something privately and I do it well, and I do it okay, it doesn't matter. If I do it correctly, if I do it privately, if I guide someone in a way where they're able to take it in, then I'm able to really achieve something because I'm able to bring peace. As the goal of the Torah is, should love your fellow as you should love your fellow Jew as you love yourself. That's the goal. The goal is to bring more peace within the world, right? Classically, the way people have our media deal with rebuke is sowing strife and tension in our society. The Torah's got a specific achievement, because think about it. If you're the Torah and you want to put the famous verse, "Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamoch," and you shall love your fellow as yourself, where would you put it? Torah puts it right over here, because these are very interchangeable and interlocked and connected. I want you to love your fellow, and therefore, when you do the review, you need to do it in a way that is sensitive, so that you can build that. And if you're not able to achieve the building, if you're not able to bring more peace and more love, then don't do it at all. Because that's the last verse of that subject is Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamoch. You shall love your fellow as yourself. That's the goal. The goal is to build love within the Jewish community. So here we have the Gemara. The Gemara cites other statements made of Rabbi Eli in the name of Rabbi Lazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Elaz, and Rabbi Elaz in the name of Rabbi Lazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon. Just as it is a mitzvah for a person to say that which will be heeded, so too is it a mitzvah for a person not to say that which will not be heeded. If I know they're not going to listen, if I know they're not going to change, then there's a mitzvah not to try and do it. Rabbi Abba says it is obligatory for one to refrain from speaking, as it states, "Do not reprove a scorner, lest he hate you. Reprove a wise man, and he will love him." That's quoted in Proverbs. Be very careful how we go about doing that, so that we're going to try and achieve a building, not a destruction. So that is like, we started off with regards to how do you tell off your own kids, right? Or how do you work with your own kids? I think, and then we go to the Torah, and the Torah tells you how to build community, how to build society. You want to do it in private. You want to do it softly. You want to make sure that they're not going to hurt, that their face won't change color, right? And then perhaps we can bring that down with regards to our own kids. When we are working with our kids, and there's an area that we want them to change, want to empower them to change. It needs to be soft. It needs to be sensitive. It needs to be done in a way that they're going to hear, because if they don't hear, then what have we achieved? The goal at the end of the day is that there's love that's being sown within the community. And that's perhaps when we're going to rebuke our kids, don't do it in front of their siblings. That does not work. Okay, I can talk from personal experience. Do not rebuke. Coming back to that mitzvah, and nonetheless, in the Sefer Achinuch mitzvah 239, and nonetheless, it is for every careful person to consider and to pay great attention to these matters, and to think and see if there will be benefit to the sinner with his words, such that he should rebuke him and trust God may be blessed, as he will help him in his fight with God's enemies. Meaning, if I see someone doing something wrong, the Chinuch is telling us, if I see someone doing something that is wrong, immoral, unethical, and it happened to me last week. I was at Costco and I forgot my Costco card. I was actually just trying to fill gas. I was at the Costco card, right? And and I was on the phone, I parked, and I like put the thing into my car, and I'm like, I forgot the Costco card at home. So I went to the guy next to me and I said, can you forgot my Costco card? And he just looked at me, I don't feel comfortable, and closed it. That was fine. So there could have been, I don't know which is the right way or what's the right way or the wrong way to do it. But there are ways sometimes where someone will tell us something, and if done sensitively, it will empower us to change ourselves, right? Think about a time where you changed an act or a behavior, or we changed something because someone said something to us. How was it done? Was it done when we felt loved, or was it done when we felt they were to spite us? So much of our reaction is dependent on that relationship. And if that is so, the Torah tells us, recognize it's all about the relationship. If I come from a place where they know they're loved and cared for, that's what 5-1. If my child feels that I am always there for them, that I'm constantly looking at their good and I'm constantly looking at their positive, then they're going to respond when I do point out something a way that they should change. Okay, so the chinuch are just a summary of this last point. What the chinuch is saying is, don't be scared if you see someone doing something wrong and you may be able to change them. Do it in a sensitive way. You never know that you may be able to change them. Sometimes we work in a society where I don't want to have anything to do with anyone else. I'm just going to ignore them. I know that's not right. And they live in their bubble and I live in my bubble. Chinuch says, don't do that, because we kind of we're not only part of a global community, but we carry responsibility for each other. Yeah. One of the first times we find this idea of tochacha, of rebuke, is by Abraham. And here's the verse. These are the verses, Genesis 21, verses 24 and 27. Okay, now this is not necessary. So remember, we spoke about there's two concepts. There's the concept of between man and God, and there's man and their fellow man. So if I see someone between man and God doing something that's incorrect, I need to go and try and change them if I'm able to, and if I think that they will actually listen. And that's what the Gemara says, like, only do it if you know that they're going to listen. Okay? So now, here we're going to deal with an interpersonal relationship. What happened is, Abraham, he's the founder of kindness in the world and of care for their fellow person. Abraham goes and he digs wells. There are lots of underwater resources of water around Israel. And Abraham, he has the resource, he has the manpower. They'll go and dig wells to enable people to have water. Kindness, absolute kindness. So what happened was, Abraham was digging wells, and the servants of Abimelech, who was a king at the time, they were blocking up the wells. They wanted to use it for personal use, or they didn't want movement through their area. Okay, they wanted to control the area. So at that time, Abimelech and Fichol, chief of his troops, Fichol was the minister of his army, said to Abraham, God is with you in everything that you do. Therefore, swear to me by God that you will not deal falsely with me or with my children and grandchildren, but will deal with me and with the land in which you have lived as loyally as I've dealt with you. Avimelech realizes Abraham is going to be staying here, or the offspring of Abraham is going to be staying in the land of Canaan, in the land of Israel. And he said, let's make a deal. We'll be fair towards each other. You won't come and kick my family out. So Abraham said, fine, I swear. Now there's one thing called a more advanced swear, which is called a covenant. So it's one thing I promise you that I won't do anything against you. And then there's a covenant which kind of builds a relationship. Okay? And Avimelech actually wants a built relationship. Okay? So, and Abraham is also interested in building this relationship with Avimelech. Okay? But there's something wrong. There's a problem. Abraham's got something sitting on his heart, and he needs to air it out. So Abraham reproached Avimelech for the well of water which the servants of Avimelech had seized. By the way, who spoke to Abraham? Avimelech and Fichol, the chief of his officers. Okay? Who did Abraham speak to reply? First, in public, Abraham said, I swear, no problem. We'll make peace. And then it says, and Abraham reproached Avimelech, not Avimelech and Fichol. He approached Avimelech. He took him in private, and he said, about the well, for the well of water which the servants of Avimelech had seized. He had a private conversation. He said, look, I have an issue. I want to make a deal with you. I want to build a relationship with you, but I've got an issue about what happened. Did it in private. He did it sensitively. He didn't say, you stole my wells. Your servants had stolen my wells. He gives them an opening to make things right. And Avimelech actually goes and takes it. Avimelech said, I do not know who did this. You did not tell me until now, nor have I heard about it until today. This is the first I'm hearing about it. So Avimelech kind of cleans himself up and he says, I didn't know about it. It was not part of me. I had nothing to do. I didn't even know about it till today. And you could have come up to me, but you didn't. So I'm cleaning myself off. So Abraham gave him an opening. Avimelech took the opening and he said, I'm sorry, I didn't know about it. Okay? And immediately after, Abraham takes a sheep and oxen and gives them to Avimelech, and the two of them, they made a pact, they made the covenant. Abraham needed to clean himself off the relationship. He opened it up. He understood, he wanted to hear. He thought that there was a direct information from Avimelech to his servants to go and seize the wells of Abraham. Avimelech said, I didn't know about it. No one told me, and this is the first that I heard about it. So now Abraham can make a covenant with Avimelech. The error has been cleaned, right? So we see how to go about doing it. Number one, if someone does something against me, something to hurt me, right? We need to go in from an open relationship. Go in sensitively, go in with privacy, okay? And give them an ability of opening of an out. Give them that opportunity where they are able to explain themselves and give them an opening out. The Torah tells us, by the way, with regards to war, when we go, this is just a side note. Torah tells us in a situation of war, one needs to, and one surrounds a city, always need to give them a back door to allow them to get out. Don't force a city to be completely blockaded in, because it's very dangerous when someone is blocked into a corner. It's very dangerous how they react. They react irrationally, and they react in a very dangerous way. So the Torah says always leave them an opening. That's in war, but the truth is It's with any conversation that we have with regards to our fellow. And the challenge is, it's really all about our ego. The whole situation, how they are going to react is dependent on how comfortable I am with myself. I'm in a good place. I don't need them to be, I don't need to put them down in order for me to receive anything. I need to be in a good place and give them that opening. Perhaps you didn't realize what really happened by your action. Yeah.
So, this person was like Miller.
Mhm.
So, did Abraham give him the sheep that Abimelech didn't know? That's the one thing. On the other hand, even if Abimelech really had told his servants to close the well, now that Abraham spoke out, he brought to their attention, I know they might. And Abimelech, obviously, let's call it learned his lesson, so he wasn't going to do that anymore. Either way, is it okay? Or, you know, like, if you did know about it, he lied and said, I didn't know, but he's now learned the lesson. And on the other hand, if he really didn't know, so that's great too, that he came to him calmly and quietly, and he also gave him
To make
smooth everything out very nicely. So I think that you might have told the servant to do that.
So you're saying, what is Abraham's perspective over here? Does he believe Abimelech, or is
because
he made a
a
covenant?
presence, but even if he, I'm just wondering, you know, like, it doesn't make sense. If Abimelech had told the servants to close up the things, and he said, I didn't know, and
Right.
because obviously it was mean that he didn't do it, so he learned his lesson anyway. And yet, if he'd been accused erroneously,
Yeah.
in other words, he really didn't know, so this was all smoothed out anyway by giving the present.
Right. So I'll tell you, until today, I'm 45 years old. Until today, I always learned these verses, as Abraham told Abimelech off. Abimelech cleaned himself, but we all know the truth that it was all Abimelech's fault. That's the way I always learned, right? From today, I kind of like, well, this is actually brought down as the quote of about giving rebuke. Perhaps I was wrong with regards to my read of Abimelech, and perhaps it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is we're trying to build a community and trying to build a relationship. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to be stupid and go and say like, well, this person stole, you know, all my 401k and blew it on BitCurrency, and who knows where it went, and now I don't have any more money, and now I come and tell them off, and he cleans off his response. It's not my fault, it was my partner, right? And that you must go and invest again with that person, right? But it doesn't mean that you can't go and have that conversation with it. Go.
How are you going to be calm when you do that conversation?
That's where it's all about your ego. Yeah. I want to say something now that I'm thinking about it. What's interesting is that the whole conversation begins almost with Avimelech coming to a realization. The verses start, Avimelech goes to Abraham and says, God is with you. I recognize you're in a good place. I want to partner with that. Okay. And I wonder if that is the impetus for Abraham to trust Abimelech. You know what I mean? That until now, Abraham didn't have anything to do with Abimelech, and he didn't think it's worth even having this conversation. Now Abimelech is coming from a perspective where he's open, and perhaps Abimelech is genuine about his relationship and his connection that he wants. Now I want to do this last point of the Ramban, because what the Ramban does is Nachmanides, he brings those three verses together, and he explains how we deal with why the Torah brings all those verses and puts them together. He says as follows: the correct interpretation appears to me to be that the expression "Ocheach tocheach," you shall surely rebuke, is similar "Vocheach Avraham," and Abraham reproved Abimelech. The verse here is thus stating, do not hate your brother in your heart when he does something to you against your will, but instead you are to reprove him, saying, why did you do thus to me? And you will not bear a sin because of him by covering up your hatred in your heart and not telling him, for when you will reprove him, he will justify himself before you, so that you will have no cause to hate him, or he will regret his action and admit his sin, and you will forgive him. The Torah is doing a beautiful thing over here. The Torah says, I want you to build a loving community. What happens is, within a community, people will hurt each other. People will do things where they don't necessarily, they're not sensitive towards each other. They're not necessarily, they may do things without thinking and may hurt other people. Torah says, number one, I want you to recognize that in general, people are good. They're not necessarily thinking well. They don't always have their thinking heads on, but they're good people. Okay? And if we come with that, we start with that, people are good. Okay, but the person hurt me. The person did this. I asked them to do X, Y, and Z for me, and they didn't. They went and did that, and they hurt me. And it spoke negatively about it. Okay? So the Torah says, well, carry it in your heart. That's not a good thing at all. Because carrying hate in one's heart is really going to cause further friction and further breakup of the community. So the Torah says, okay, first of all, you need to go and have a conversation with them. How do you have a conversation? Have a conversation where it's private, where it's sensitive, where the person's color won't change, where they won't be embarrassed, right? And where you give them an opening to either explain what really happened, where they can say, I totally didn't realize. Or ideally, they'll say, that's usually what happens. Usually we just don't hear the other side of the story. So we're looking to hear the other side of the story. That's what the Torah is trying. Look for the other side of the story. And if there isn't so much of the other side of the story, what we're really doing is coming saying, I want to have a good relationship. And that gives them the opening of saying, I'm sorry. Or he will regret his action and admit his sin, and you will forgive him, so that you can build this concept of Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. You shall love your fellow as yourself. Build the Jewish community. So it's, I think it's the most beautiful way of giving rebuke. We start off, as we said, there's no right way of saying rebuke. How do you use that word? It's a difficult word, right? And then the Torah kind of puts things in context. What's the goal over here? The goal is really to build community. The goal is to build people up and enable them to be the best people that they can be. How do we do that? Well, first of all, always do it in private. Make sure that it's done in a sensitive way, where their color doesn't change. Also, give them that opportunity of having it out. Abraham gave Abimelech the opportunity of having it out. Having it out. And I don't necessarily care if what they're out is true or not, because at the end of the day, how many times have we been given a chance by someone who allowed us back into a relationship because something we did was wrong? They gave us, word.
Tools.
No, they gave us an opportunity of having like, saying wasn't really my fault. They embraced us, and that changed us. And then we came back to this. I really messed up. It was unintentional. I'm sorry about that. And that really builds community. At the end of the day, the last part of that verse is "V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha." Love your fellow as yourself. Do not take grudge. Do not take vengeance. Do not what's the word? Do not take vengeance, but love them as yourself. Ani Hashem. Let God take care of. Now, I don't have to solve the world's problems or America's political situation or whatever it is. I don't have to care. Let God run a couple of things and let me do my share with building love within the right. Exactly.
I mean.
Right. Exactly. Right. We want to build this connection. Exactly. Exactly. That's the secret.
I want to say, Rabbi, that this is one of the best classes I've ever attended. You were really, really good for me. But
Hannah's
the
like,
other thing that I wanted to say, I had a very interesting experience. My son was leaving for college, and I went out to dinner with my ex-husband and my son. And a friend of mine came up to me and I said, "Oh, Aaron is leaving in 3 weeks. I'm not so depressed." And my friend says, "When is he leaving?" I said, "September." I said, "Oh my God, highlights in 2 weeks." I looked at the guy and I said, "Stuart, I did not like you from the moment." And you guys know me, I have a terrible sense of humor. And he looked at me and he said, I didn't say that. I mean, okay. This was, I don't know, 15 years ago. So then, a few weeks later, we went shul. My son went to Shepherd. We went shul, and the steward comes up to me and says, "Hannah, remember what you said to me at the restaurant?" I said, "No, I don't." So he reminds me.
Yeah.
I said, "Steward, I would never say that to anybody unless I really didn't like them, and then I wouldn't have anything to do with them." He says, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yes." So he took up the picture of me and my son, and he says, "I want you." And it really made me feel good. And ever since, first of all, when I see him, I don't joke because I'm so afraid of him. And his name is Stuart Coleman. But anyway, but he's really like many times I'll say things, and I hope I've never offended anybody because I never do.
But so that's a great example where I'm saying he could have just carried this in his heart and never wanted to have anything to do with you guys anymore. How many communities have broken up because we couldn't have that private conversation with someone else and say, let's just have a heart to heart. Let's just talk this out. This hurt me, and give them that opportunity of apologizing, or the opportunity of saying that, it's not necessarily my fault, and then building that up. If we do that, that really can keep building our community. Okay, any questions? Thank you, everybody. Susan.
I do think though that people change for the better,
Mhm.
evaluate. Determine.
Right.
Generation overall. That's.
Receptive. Right. The goal is to enable change. That needs to be the goal. You know, I mean, like that is how, and I'm gonna say this in a harsh way, but that is what separates us, the Torah from social media. Social media is not trying to change anyone. We're just trying to put other people down. That's social media. We are trying to build people up. That's what the goal is. Rebuke is to try. The rebuke from a Torah perspective is to try and build people, and that always needs to be our goal. If I can't build them up, then don't say it. Don't say it. It's not worth.
But for example, if we see somebody do something cool, picking the food, the cat,
Do it in a sensitive way.
what are you going to do? Just when you see something like that, and it infuriates you. I just stop down. Obviously, it's a cool person. How do you do that? You can't not say anything.
Right.
Now,
Thank you, everyone who came on.
What's this?